background again, for those who don't know, so the Murnau film Nosferatu Symphony of Horror, which kind of combines this fear of disease with this vampire narrative, which is lifted from Bram Stoker, despite what Robert Eggers said, it was a copyright issue. I mean, I know that obviously when they change things, and he talks about it then becoming a more fairy tale thing, yeah, fine, they did it. But they changed things because it was a copyright issue. And in fact, it was such a copyright issue that, as was pointed out, Bram Stoker's widow sued, and the case was won. And theoretically, all copies of Nosferatu should then have been destroyed. I think they destroyed the negative, but of course, copies survived. And the film, like a vampire, somehow came back even more powerfully after having been, in inverted commas, killed. There's also the whole thing about the etymology of the word Nosferatu, exactly what it means. I was reading a very interesting piece that Kim Newman, who's the great authority in all of this, was saying that there is a Greek word nosophoros, which means disease bearing. Yeah. Stoker was obviously using it in the undead tradition. But so that whole thing about disease and vampirism being connected with that all fits in. And then again, of course, in the original, because of the copyright thing, so names are changed. Dracula becomes Orlok, played by Max Schreck. The settings, it's Germany, it's 1830s. But the basic story is eerily similar to Stoker's novel, and that's why the copyright thing played out as it was. Then in 1979, there was a remake by Werner Herzog of Nosferatu, which had Klaus Kinski in the vampire role. Again, I would refer you to, there's a piece that Kim Newman wrote in Empire, who said, people will call this the third outing of Nosferatu, but if you know anything about this, it's probably the 30th take on it, because he said there are at least two films called Nosferatu and Nosferatu, and there's been all these kind of spin-offs and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so here comes the Eggers version, in which Bill Skarsgård is Count Orlok, Nicholas Hoult, who we were talking about in The Order just recently, is the young solicitor, Thomas. Lily Rose Depp is Ellen. Thomas is sent by Simon McBurney's Herr Nock to take some title deeds to this count in this distant land. Despite the warnings of the locals when he gets there, they all go, you really don't want to go up there. He does. He meets Orlok. I mean, they do. They literally go, no, don't go anywhere near there.
As tradition demands, the villagers don't want him to do it.
The villagers are not happy about it. And so he goes up there and he meets, again, what Eggers refers to as an undead Transylvanian nobleman. And I thought it was very interesting in that interview that he said, well, what is Max Schreck? What is he? Because what I was trying to imagine was that this is quite genuinely an undead nobleman. So he has a moustache, and he does the thing about when he cuts his finger, drools over the finger, and then becomes obsessed with his partner. And then when Orlok comes to, is it Wisborg or wherever it is, on the boat is full of plaguey rats. Thomas and Friedrich, played by Aaron Taylor-Johnson, are led to a vampire specialist, Professor von Franz, who's kind of the Van Helsing character, played by Willem Dafoe, who, trivia lovers, played Max Schreck in the 2000 mystery thriller Shadow of the Vampire, about the making of Murnau's Nosferatu. Now, considering the reverence that Eggers has had for this text, as he said in that interview, he did it as a play when he was young because he was so struck by it because he saw it as a kid. I was really expecting Robert Eggers' Nosferatu to be a very, very somber affair. This is much more of a romp than I had expected. There was a quote that I read from an interview in which Eggers described it as like if Merchant Ivory did a Hammer horror movie. The Merchant Ivory thing is that's a red herring. The Hammer part of that sentence is the part that's doing the heavy lifting. I mean, yes, the visuals by the regular cinematographer Yaron Blaschke are terrific. I mean, it's a strangely monochrome form of color. It's a color movie, but it's a black only and white color movie, and there's only just color, exactly. And there is plenty of Murnau inflected shadow play. And the kind of candlelit interiors that Stanley Kubrick had to go to NASA for when he was doing Barry Lyndon, but now things have moved on. There was huge sections of it in which I was thinking, it's just remarkable that they've managed to capture those images so crisply on screen. But, and here's the really important thing, there is real lusty blood in this Nosferatu, not least in the portrayal of the central female character, who, like Isabella Gianni in the Herzog, and of course this goes right back to the original Nosferatu. And Robert Eggers was talking very interestingly about how he thinks Nosferatu is more interesting because of that central female role in the narrative. I mean, here it's absolutely central. It's pretty much the thing around which the rest of the movie spins. I mean, you raised the question of is it her fault? I think fault is the wrong word. I think it's an interesting question, but I think it's much more empowering than that. This is a world in which that central female character has real agency, a world in which, somnambulism was seen as demonic possession, and in which a sort of rebellious spirit was considered as something that had to be stamped down. And whether you think of that rebellious spirit as a sexual appetite or just an independent appetite or an independence of thought, I mean, it's absolutely clear that Thomas is not up to the challenge. I mean, Thomas doesn't really understand the facets of this woman who is sort of being sidelined by society for the fact that she is independent and powerful. So she is a woman out of time, and that makes her, somehow branded as evil or mad. But if she is indeed drawing the Count to her, then she is also controlling. And it's not just sacrifice. There is an element of control. And I think that what Eggers' film does is properly give that character agency, makes it more, as he said, more emotionally and psychologically complex than perhaps the Stoker version. But I think actually develops on the previous incarnations.
So she is responsible for the chaos.
I think responsible rather than fault is the thing. I think, or at least she is powering it. She is somehow in control of it. Because yes, I think it is much more connected with agency than it is to do with fault. There was also the interesting question that you raised there about, obsession, possession. The possession scenes in the thing, if we're going to call them possession scenes, they're remarkable. I mean, you said she's basically an acrobat. A contortionist, and I was thinking of those scenes in The Last Exorcism, in which there is a similar kind of physical performance that is really like astonishing. I always remember, again, to bring this back to Kim Newman, if you're interested in vampires and Nosferatu, read Kim Newman on the subject. Kim Newman always said the whole problem with The Exorcist is that Regan is much more interesting when she's Pazuzu than when she's Tammy. I was just surprised by how much of a romp this was. I mean, bits of it are scary. Bits of it are, full-blooded. Simon McBurney absolutely steals the show. Didn't you think he was on fire? He was having so much fun.
Yeah, you want to know how much Eggers is into the occult? Look at Simon McBurney's character.
Yeah. And then, I certainly think that after, I thought The Northman was a mess. And I think that it's absolutely the case that some people, and I think you're included in this, found The Lighthouse too tough going.
Yes,
I
saw that and Uncut Gems on the same day, and that was not a good day for me.
So I think this is Eggers back on the form and the promise of the Vavitch, because obviously he was talking about doing this immediately after the Vavitch. That was, it's the projects were genetically linked. I think at one point Anya Taylor-Joy was in the frame as well. But I think it's his most accessible film. I think it looks amazing. I think it's done really interesting things with the narrative. And I was just surprised by, and I mean this in the best possible sense, how much fun it was. And on the subject of Skarsgård's, you were talking about what, he did Pennywise the Clown and the Dancing Clown, and, has this kind of, there is something about the way in which he's embodying the monstrousness. Even with the distracting moustache, I think that thing that what Eggers was saying about, well, let's try to make it an undead nobleman as opposed to, a character that is the Nosferatu as opposed to a human being. I think there is enough humanity in there to get that across. So I think this version is enough of its own version to distinguish it from other versions, whether you think there have been 2 other versions or 25 other versions, as Kim was saying. And I think that it romps along. I think it looks splendid. See it in a good cinema. You wouldn't want to see this in a cinema in which they hadn't refreshed the bulbs recently because, it uses darkness visible. But I was really surprised by how much I enjoyed it.